And where it starts, you might recognize it. You might have lived something close to it yourself. Her name was Denise Carter, 47 years old, single mother, born and raised in Memphis, Tennessee, in a neighborhood where the houses were small, but the pride was large. Where your grandmother swept the front porch every morning, not because anyone was coming, but because that's what you did. Because dignity didn't wait for an audience. Denise's mother had worked 31 years as a licensed practical nurse at Methodist Le Bonheur Hospital, night shifts mostly. The kind of schedule that means you miss school, plays, and birthday dinners and Sunday mornings. But the lights stay on and the refrigerator stays full and your daughter goes to college without owing anyone anything. That was the deal her mother made with life. Denise watched her make it, and she never forgot the cost. She went to Tennessee State University on a partial academic scholarship, studied business administration, graduated in the top 8% of her class, got a job at a mid-sized property management firm in Nashville at 23, learned the business from the floor up, lease agreements, maintenance contracts, tenant relations, zoning laws, market valuation. She was good at it, not in the way people say you're good at something to be polite, in the way that results don't lie. By 31, she was managing a portfolio of 42 residential units across Davidson County. By 36, she had her own real estate license and a small side business helping first-time buyers, mostly black families, navigate a market that wasn't always designed to welcome them. She knew that market. She knew its language and its silences. She knew the difference between a neighborhood being described as up and coming versus established, and what those words really meant depending on who was asking. She had seen it her whole life, but knowing something and living through it again are two different things. Her marriage ended when her daughter, Brianna, was 9 years old. No drama, no betrayal, just two people who had grown in directions that no longer met. They stayed civil. They stayed parents. Denise kept the apartment in East Nashville, took on more clients, and built a life that was quieter than she'd planned, but more hers than anything she'd shared. Brianna was 17 now. Honor roll. Track team. Wanted to study architecture at Howard University. Howard University. Do you know what that costs? Denise knew. She had been building toward this for years, not just for Howard, for something larger, something her mother had dreamed about and never reached, something that would take everything she had learned in 24 years of working in this industry and turn it into something that couldn't be taken away. She wanted to own property, not manage it for someone else, not advise other people on how to buy it. Own it. Her name on the deed, her equity growing, her daughter watching. That was the plan. And in the spring of 2003, after 2 years of careful saving and one very good year in commissions, Denise Carter walked into Meridian Realty Group on a Tuesday morning with a pre-approval letter for $2.3 million and a list of 3 commercial properties she had been researching for 8 months. She was ready. She had done everything right. Meridian Realty Group occupied the ground floor of a glass building on Charlotte Avenue, the kind of office that wants you to feel the money before you sit down. Marble reception desk, framed architectural photos on the walls, a young woman at the front who smiled at you in a way that was professional but not warm. Denise had done her research. She knew which agent handled the commercial listings she wanted. His name was Craig Ellison, 12 years in Nashville real estate, specialized in mid-sized commercial properties, mixed-use buildings, retail spaces, small apartment complexes. He had a professional photo on the Meridian website. Blue tie, confident smile. The kind of man who coached his kids' Little League team and believed that made him a good person. She had called ahead, confirmed the appointment. His assistant had confirmed back, 9:30 a.m. Tuesday, Craig Ellison. 3 listings. Denise arrived at 9:22. She was wearing a charcoal blazer, dark slacks, simple gold earrings. Her natural hair was pulled back clean. She carried a leather portfolio and her bag. The good one, not the everyday one. She had thought about what she wore. She always did, not because she wanted to, because she had learned a long time ago that some rooms required a kind of armor. The receptionist looked up. "Can I help you? I have a 9:30 with Craig Ellison. Denise Carter." A pause, the kind that lasts 1 second too long. "Let me check." She checked. She picked up the phone. She spoke quietly. She set it down. "He'll be right with you." Denise sat. She waited. She watched 2 other people come in after her, both white, both men, one in a sport coat and one in a fleece vest, and both were greeted within minutes. One by Craig himself, who came through the side door with his hand already extended, laughing at something before he even arrived. She watched him walk that man back without once looking toward the waiting area. She sat for 40 minutes. At 10:11, Craig Ellison finally approached her. No apology for the wait, no acknowledgement of the time. "Ms. Carter?" "Yes, Craig Ellison." He shook her hand, brief, businesslike. "Why don't we step over here?" Not his office. A small conference room near the front, the kind they use for conversations they don't expect to last long. She laid her portfolio on the table. She had printed the listings, addresses, square footage, current assessed values, her own comparable market analysis. She slid them across. He glanced at them, just glanced. "So, you're interested in commercial property, specifically these 3. I've been tracking them for several months. The Buchanan Street building in particular. That one's already in negotiation." She paused. "It wasn't listed that way on your website this morning." Things move fast. He leaned back. "The other 2, honestly, for what you're describing, I think you might be looking at the wrong market. These are significant investments. The Buchanan property alone is sitting at $1.8 million asking. I have a pre-approval for $2.3 million. Something moved across his face, not belief. Something closer to recalculation. "From which lender?" she told him. He nodded slowly. The way people nod when they're deciding whether to change their approach or stay the course. He stayed the course. "I'll be honest with you, and I say this to help you, not discourage you. These buildings require a certain level of operational experience. Managing commercial tenants is a different animal than residential. The liability exposure alone. I've been in property management for over 20 years. Right. He said it the way people say it when they haven't heard you. What I'd suggest is maybe starting with something smaller. I have some residential listings in Antioch, Bordeaux. Good starter investment properties. More appropriate for where you are right now? Where you are right now." Denise looked at him. She let the silence sit there for just a moment, long enough for him to feel it, not long enough for him to name it. Then she picked up her papers, folded them back into her portfolio, clicked it shut. "Thank you for your time," she said. And she stood up, and she left. She did not slam the door. She did not cry in the parking lot. She sat in her car for 4 minutes, hands on the wheel, engine off, looking at the glass building through the windshield. Then she started the car, and she started making calls. There's something nobody tells you about being a black woman who has been dismissed. They assume you're going to react. They wait for it, actually. The raised voice, the complaint filed with HR, the post on social media, the visible anger that lets them say, "See, that's why." And maybe that anger is justified. It usually is. But Denise Carter had learned something over 47 years that most people never fully understand. Reaction is temporary. Strategy is permanent. She didn't call a lawyer that afternoon. She didn't post anything. She didn't even tell her daughter what had happened. She called her accountant, a woman named Gloria Reeves, who had been doing Denise's books for 11 years and who understood, without being told, when a phone call was business and when it was something more. "I need to know everything about the Buchanan Street building," Denise said. "Ownership structure, liens, tax history, vacancy rate, everything." Gloria was quiet for a moment. "How soon?" "Yesterday." The Buchanan Street building was a 4-story mixed-use property in a neighborhood that Nashville's development money had been quietly circling for 2 years. Ground floor retail, a dry cleaner, an insurance office, a sandwich shop that had been there since 1987. Upper 3 floors, 14 residential units, 8 of which were occupied. The building was owned by a limited liability company called Whitmore Property Holdings, which, when you trace the paperwork back through 2 layers of registered agents, belonged to a 63-year-old developer named Raymond Whitmore, who had been sitting on the property for 9 years and hadn't done a significant renovation since the Obama administration. The roof had issues. The HVAC system in units 7 through 11 was original to 1994. 2 of the ground floor retail spaces had been vacant for 14 months, and Raymond Whitmore, as of the previous fiscal year, was carrying $340,000 in deferred maintenance costs that he did not have liquid capital to address. He needed to sell. He just hadn't admitted it publicly yet. Denise knew this kind of situation. She had seen it dozens of times in her career. An aging owner, a building that needed more than he could give it, a market heating up around him faster than he could move. He was waiting for the right buyer, someone who would let him save face, close quietly, and walk away with enough to matter. She could be that buyer, but not through Craig Ellison. She thought about this carefully, not emotionally. Strategically, Craig Ellison had made a decision about her before she sat down. He had looked at her and seen a category, not a client. And that decision, in his mind, had protected something. The building, his other clients, some idea he carried around about who deserved to be in certain rooms. She wasn't going to correct him. She was going to go around him. She reached out to Raymond Whitmore directly, not through the listing, not through Meridian. She found his business address through the county property records, public information available to anyone willing to spend 45 minutes looking, and she sent him a letter, 1 page, typed, professional. She introduced herself. She outlined her experience. She made a specific clean offer, $196 million, cash equivalent financing, 30-day close, as is condition with a negotiated repair credit. No contingencies that would slow things down. No drama. Just a clean transaction from a buyer who knew exactly what she was buying. She signed it with her full name and her license number, and then she waited. She had learned to wait. Not the passive kind of waiting, the kind where you sit by the phone hoping, the active kind. The kind where you keep moving while you wait, where you prepare the next step before you know if the current one worked, where you hold the outcome loosely because you know that desperation is the one thing that can unravel a deal faster than anything else. She spent those 2 weeks doing 3 things. First, she walked the Buchanan Street block 6 times. Different days, different times of day. She talked to the sandwich shop owner, a man named Earl, who had been there since the building opened and who told her, without much prompting, that the landlord hadn't fixed the back entrance in 8 months, and that 2 of the upstairs tenants had left because of the heating situation. Second, she had her attorney review the ownership documents Gloria had pulled. Everything was clean. No serious litigation. One unresolved code violation from 2021 that had been cited but not corrected. The kind of thing that becomes leverage in a negotiation if you know it's there. Third, she called her lender and locked her rate. On a Thursday morning, 17 days after she had mailed that letter, her phone rang. Unknown number. Nashville area code. "This is Raymond Whitmore," the voice said. "I got your letter." She let one beat of silence pass. "Mr. Whitmore, thank you for calling." His voice was careful, not unfriendly. The voice of a man who had been in business long enough to know that the person calling him with a clean offer deserved at least a conversation. "You went around my listing agent," he said. "I did. Any particular reason?" She thought about how to answer that. She could have said many things. She chose the truest one that was also the most useful. "I prefer to work directly with owners when I can. Less noise between the people who actually need to reach an agreement." A pause. "You know the building needs work." "I know exactly what it needs. That's in my offer." Another pause. Longer this time. "You said 30-day close." "I did." "That's fast." "I'm ready." And that was the moment. Not the dramatic one. Not the one anyone would make a movie about. But that was the moment everything shifted. Because Raymond Whitmore had been waiting for someone who was ready. Not eager. Not desperate. Ready. There's a difference. Eager people overpay. Ready people close. He said he needed to think about it over the weekend. She said, of course. He called back on Saturday morning. He accepted. The closing happened on a Friday. 3rd week of July. Nashville in the summer is the kind of heat that sits on you. Heavy. Patient. Like it has nowhere else to be. Denise drove to the title company on Dedrick Street with the windows down for the first 5 minutes, then switched to the air conditioning when Brianna called from her summer program at Vanderbilt and asked where she was going. "I'm closing on a building today," Denise said. A pause on the line. "Wait, the one you've been researching?" "The one." Mama. Just that word. The way her daughter said it, not like a child calling for her mother, but like a woman recognizing another woman. Like she understood, without needing the full story, what this had taken. "I'll tell you everything tonight," Denise said. "Go learn something." She heard Brianna laugh as she hung up. The title company was on the 4th floor of a downtown building. Conference room. Long table. A title officer named Patricia, who had been doing closings for 22 years and moved through the paperwork with the calm efficiency of someone who had seen every kind of transaction and stopped being impressed by any of them. Raymond Whitmore was already there when Denise arrived. Older than she'd imagined from his voice. Gray at the temples. A sport coat that had been good quality once. He stood when she came in. Old-fashioned manners, and shook her hand with both of his. "Ms. Carter." "Mr. Whitmore." They sat across from each other. Patricia arranged the documents in 2 neat stacks. There wasn't much conversation. There rarely is at a closing. The talking is already done by then. What's left is just the formal acknowledgement of what both parties have already decided. Signatures. Initials, a notary stamp, the specific silence of a transaction completing. But at one point, while Patricia stepped out to make copies, Raymond Whitmore looked across the table at Denise with an expression she couldn't quite read at first. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Sure. You sent me that letter directly. Bypassed Craig Ellison entirely." He paused. "He's been my listing agent for 4 months. He's going to be unhappy about this." Denise met his eyes. "I imagine he will be," she said. Raymond studied her for a moment. something working behind his eyes. He showed me his call log. Raymond continued, said he never had a serious inquiry come in on the property. No qualified buyers. He said it carefully, watching her face. She didn't flinch. I came into his office in April, she said simply. Pre-approval letter for $2.3 million. He suggested I look at residential properties in Bordeaux. The room was very quiet. Raymond Whitmore looked down at the table. Something moved across his face. Not surprise exactly. More like the particular fatigue of a man who has lived long enough to know exactly what he's hearing and can no longer pretend otherwise. "I'm sorry," he said, quietly, directly. The kind of apology that doesn't ask for anything back. She nodded once. "Let's finish the paperwork," she said. Patricia came back. They signed. They initialed. The notary stamped. At 2:47 p.m. on a Friday in July, Denise Carter became the legal owner of a 4-story mixed-use building on Buchanan Street in Nashville, Tennessee. $1.6 million. As is. 30-day close, exactly as she had written in the letter. She didn't take a photo in the parking lot. She didn't post anything that day. She drove home, changed out of her blazer, and started a list of contractors she trusted. Because the building was hers now, and there was work to do. Here's what nobody talks about when they tell stories like this. They skip the middle part. They go straight from the injustice to the triumph, as if the space between those two things is just time passing, as if Denise had simply waited and the universe corrected itself. That's not what happened. What happened in those 3 months between walking out of Meridian Realty and sitting at that closing table was work. Unglamorous, relentless, specific work. The kind that doesn't make for good storytelling, but makes for real outcomes. She had her contractor, a man named James Whitfield, who had been renovating properties in Nashville for 18 years, and who did not pad estimates or disappear after the first check. Walk the building with her the week after closing. They went unit by unit, floor by floor. The HVAC in units 7 through 11, $34,000 to replace properly. She had negotiated a $28,000 repair credit from Raymond Whitmore. The gap was hers to cover. She covered it. The roof needed targeted repairs in 2 sections, not a full replacement. James had told her that before the closing. That's why she had insisted on as is. She knew the number, and she knew it was manageable. $19,500. The vacant ground floor retail spaces, she didn't rush to fill them. She spent 6 weeks looking at who was asking about the spaces and what they planned to do with them. She turned down 2 offers, a check-cashing business and a vaping shop, not because she had anything against the people, but because she had a vision for what she was building, and those weren't it. The third offer came from a woman named Diane Okafor, 41 years old, who had been running a natural hair care studio out of her home for 4 years and was ready to move into a real space. She had a business plan, a client list, and the kind of steady-handed calm that told you she thought carefully about every decision. Denise gave her a lease at a rate she could actually afford to grow into. The fourth offer came from a young man named Marcus Webb, who wanted to open a used bookstore with a small cafe in the back. He had no credit history to speak of, but he had a detailed business proposal and a letter of support from his former employer, and the kind of earnest conviction that either burns out fast or builds something real. She spent 2 hours talking to him before she decided. She gave him the space because Denise Carter understood something about this building that Craig Ellison never could have. It wasn't just a real estate investment. It was a block. It was a corner of a neighborhood that was changing fast, the kind of changing where longtime residents blink and suddenly can't afford to stay, where the coffee shops arrive and the families leave, where the history of a place gets scraped off and sold back at a premium to people who never knew it was there. She was not going to be the instrument of that. She was going to be the counterweight. The 8 occupied residential units, she met every tenant in the first 2 weeks, knocked on every door, introduced herself, asked them what needed fixing, listened, actually listened, not with a clipboard, not with half her attention, but the full kind of listening that her mother had modeled in 31 years of caring for patients who just needed someone to take them seriously. She fixed what needed fixing. She kept rents stable through the end of the current lease year. She did not begin the process of pushing anyone out. She was building something, and she was building it the way her mother had taught her. Not for the next quarter, not for the next year, but for the kind of time that makes something real. By October, the building had a 96% occupancy rate. Diane Okafor's hair studio had a 6-week waiting list. Marcus Webb's bookstore had been featured in the Nashville scene as one of 12 new small businesses changing the character of the neighborhood. The building's assessed value had increased by $340,000 in 4 months, and Craig Ellison was still at Meridian Realty, still handling commercial listings, still deciding every day who looked like a serious buyer and who didn't. He had no idea what was coming. Craig Ellison had a good October. 2 commercial closings, 1 mixed-use property in Germantown, 1 retail strip in Berry Hill. His commission checks were solid. His name was on the Meridian leaderboard for the 3rd month in a row. He took his family to Gatlinburg for a long weekend and posted photos of the mountains on his Instagram. He had completely forgotten about Denise Carter. That's the thing about people who dismiss you quickly. They don't carry it. They move on before you've even reached your car. The interaction that reshapes your entire trajectory doesn't even register as a memory for them. You spend months building your response, and they spent 30 seconds making the decision that required it. She knew this. She had counted on it. Because the most powerful position you can be in when someone has underestimated you is the one where they don't see you coming. Not because you're hiding, because they never looked. In November, Meridian Realty Group sent a company-wide email to their commercial clients and prospects announcing an expansion of their property management division. They were actively seeking building owners in the Midtown, Germantown, and North Nashville corridors who were interested in outsourcing the day-to-day management of their commercial properties. Denise received that email. She was on their mailing list. She had never been removed. She read it twice. Then she set it aside and thought about it for 3 days, not because she needed Meridian, but because of what the opportunity represented. Because sometimes life hands you a door that is also a mirror, and you have to decide whether you're going to walk through it or just stand there looking at your own reflection. She walked through it. She called Meridian's main line and asked to speak to whoever handled their new property management partnerships. She was transferred to a woman named Sandra Cole, the director of their commercial division, someone Denise had not encountered before. And she introduced herself as the owner of a mixed-use property on Buchanan Street, currently running at 96% occupancy with a stabilized tenant mix and strong year-1 revenue. Sandra was interested immediately. They scheduled a meeting. Denise arrived at the Meridian office on a Tuesday morning. She was wearing a charcoal blazer, dark slacks, simple gold earrings, the same leather portfolio, the same bag. She had chosen them deliberately. The receptionist, a different young woman this time, someone who hadn't been there in April, smiled and offered coffee. Denise said yes. She sat in the same waiting area. She looked at the same framed architectural photos on the walls. She waited 7 minutes this time. Sandra Cole came out personally to greet her, mid-50s, sharp, the kind of woman who has navigated enough rooms to know exactly how to read one. They went to Sandra's office, a real office, with a window and a plant and a credenza lined with deal tombstones, and Denise presented her portfolio, not the paper documents from April, a full presentation. 12-month financials on the Buchanan Street building, occupancy history, tenant profile, capital improvements completed and planned, projected 5-year appreciation based on 3 comparable properties in the corridor. Sandra asked good questions. Denise had better answers. They were 20 minutes into the meeting when the door opened. Not all the way, just enough. Craig Ellison leaned in, the casual interruption of a man who considers other people's time available to him, with a file folder in one hand and what he probably thought was a charming expression. "Sandra, I need 5 minutes when you're—" He stopped. His eyes landed on Denise. 1 second. 2 seconds. The color didn't drain from his face all at once. It left in stages, like a tide going out. She watched him search for her name and find the place where he'd filed her. Not a real client, not a serious buyer. Somewhere in the category of people he had moved past without a second thought. And she watched him understand, in real time, that the category had been wrong. "Craig," Sandra said, without looking up from the financial summary she was reviewing. "I'm in a meeting. Give me 40 minutes. He didn't move for a moment. Then he said, "Of course." His voice was careful now, recalibrated. The door closed. Denise did not smile. She did not acknowledge it at all. She turned back to Sandra and continued her presentation exactly where she had left off. 3rd paragraph, 2nd column. Projected rent roll for year 2, as if nothing had interrupted the room, because nothing had. That was the point. The moment Craig Ellison walked through that door, he became background. He became irrelevant detail in a meeting that had nothing to do with him. She had not come back to confront him. She had come back because this was her industry, her market, her building, her meeting, and she was not going to be moved to the margins of it ever again. Sandra finished reviewing the last page of the presentation. She set it down. She looked at Denise across the desk with a particular expression of someone who has just realized they are talking to a person of significant consequence. "Ms. Carter," she said, "who currently manages your Buchanan Street property?" "I do," Denise said, directly. "And you're looking for a management partner or evaluating options?" "I'm evaluating," Denise said. "I have 2 additional acquisitions in diligence right now. When those close, the portfolio will be too large for direct management alone. I want to understand who I'd be working with before I make that decision." Sandra nodded slowly. 2 additional properties, one on Jefferson Street, one in Germantown, the Germantown property, the same corridor where Craig Ellison had just closed a deal the previous month. Sandra's expression didn't change, but something behind her eyes sharpened. "What's your timeline on those acquisitions?" "1st quarter," Denise said. "If the numbers hold," Sandra reached across the desk. "I'd like to schedule a follow-up," she said, "and I'd like to bring our managing director into that conversation." Denise looked at the extended hand. She shook it. "That works," she said. She left the building at 11:43 a.m., walked to her car, sat for a moment. Not 4 minutes this time, just 1. Because she wasn't sitting with anger anymore. She was sitting with something quieter and more durable than anger. She was sitting with the knowledge that she had built something real, that the building existed, that Diane Okafor was doing hair in a space she could afford, that Marcus Webb's books were on shelves in a neighborhood that needed them, that 8 families had heat this winter because she had replaced an HVAC system that Raymond Whitmore had let rot for 9 years. She had not done any of that to prove a point to Craig Ellison. She had done it because it was the right thing to build. Craig Ellison was just the thing that happened on the way to the building. She started the car. She had 2 properties in diligence. There was work to do if you've stayed with me this far. And I mean really stayed, not just had this playing in the background while you folded laundry. Then I want to stop for just a moment and talk to you directly. Because this story isn't really about a building. You already know that. And I think you stayed because somewhere in Denise's story, you recognized something. Maybe it was the waiting room. Maybe it was the way Craig looked at her and made a decision before she said a single word. Maybe it was the moment she sat in her car and didn't cry, not because she wasn't hurt, but because she had learned, the way so many of you have learned, that the hurt has to wait, that there are things that need doing, and you cannot afford to fall apart in the parking lot of someone else's small-mindedness. You know that feeling? I think you've been in that parking lot before. So, if this story has meant something to you, if you felt seen in these 50-something minutes, I want to invite you to subscribe to this channel and join us every day. Because this is what we do here. We tell the stories that don't get told anywhere else. The ones where the woman in the charcoal blazer wins. The ones where the building ends up in the right hands. The ones where justice is not a fantasy, but a destination, and somebody actually arrives. Hit that subscribe button. Turn on notifications. Come back tomorrow, because there is always another story worth telling. And now, let me tell you what happened with Craig Ellison. It started with a vacancy, not in Denise's building, in the one next door. The Meridian Group had been managing a small professional office building 2 doors down from Buchanan Street. 4 suites, ground floor, the kind of space that housed insurance agents and notary publics and small accounting firms. One of the anchor tenants, an insurance brokerage that had been there 11 years, announced in January that they were consolidating operations to a larger space across town. The vacancy left a hole, not just financially, physically. That kind of long-term anchor tenant leaving takes something out of a block, a steadiness, a rhythm that other businesses and foot traffic had organized themselves around. The building owner, an older investor named Gerald Park, who had purchased the property in 2009 and managed it mostly from a distance, panicked quietly. He called Meridian. Meridian assigned Craig. Craig did what Craig did. He put the listing up. He ran the numbers. He made calls. But the market had shifted. North Nashville commercial space was moving fast now. The same development pressure that had been circling the corridor for 2 years had arrived in full. New tenants wanted modern finishes, updated electrical, fiber infrastructure. Gerald's building had none of those things. It had good bones and bad everything else. And the gap between what it needed and what Gerald could spend had become, over the winter, impossible to bridge. Gerald Park needed to sell. Sound familiar? The difference was that Gerald Park had not been sitting on his property for 9 years in denial. He was a practical man who had made a practical investment and understood when the math had changed. He asked Craig to find him a buyer. Craig worked the listing for 6 weeks. 2 serious inquiries. Both fell apart in due diligence. One over financing. One over the code violations that a building inspection uncovered in the electrical system. Craig called Gerald with the update on a Wednesday afternoon. Gerald listened. Then Gerald said something Craig didn't expect. "Have you talked to the woman who owns the Buchanan building?" A pause. "Which woman?" "Carter. Denise Carter. She bought the Whitmore property last summer. My property manager mentioned she's been acquiring in the corridor. Said she's disciplined. Said she closes clean. Craig was very quiet for a moment. I can reach out to her, he said carefully. Please do, Gerald said. Today, if possible. Craig Ellison sat at his desk for a long time after that call. He knew the name. He had known it since November, since he had walked into Sandra's office and seen her sitting across the desk with a 12-month financial presentation and the particular composure of someone who had nothing left to prove. He had not spoken to her that day. He had not apologized. He had gone back to his office, closed his door, and told himself a series of small, comfortable lies about how the situation wasn't what it looked like, how he hadn't done anything wrong, how the market was complicated, and he had been protecting his client's time. The lies had held up reasonably well for 3 months. They were about to stop holding. He found her number through the Meridian system. She was in their database now, flagged as a priority commercial contact after Sandra's meeting. He stared at it for a while. Then he called. She picked up on the 3rd ring. Denise Carter. Ms. Carter, this is Craig Ellison at Meridian Realty. A beat of silence. Not an awkward one. A chosen one. Mr. Ellison, I'm reaching out on behalf of a client, Gerald Park, who owns the commercial property at 1847 Buchanan, 2 doors from your building. He's looking to sell, and I thought, given your familiarity with the corridor, I know the property, she said. Of course she did. She had walked that block 6 times before she bought her building. She had talked to Earl at the sandwich shop. She had watched that building the way she watched everything, carefully, patiently, without announcing herself. Would you be interested in a conversation? Craig asked. Send me the financials, she said. I'll review them and get back to you by end of week. Of course. He paused. Ms. Carter, end of week, she said, and hung up. She reviewed the financials that evening at her kitchen table. Brianna was upstairs studying. The apartment smelled like the jerk chicken Denise had made on Sunday, and the specific quiet of a home where a woman has arranged her life exactly the way she wants it. The numbers on Gerald Park's building were what she expected. Manageable problems. Known corridor. A price that, given the code violations, had room to move. She called Gloria. The Park building on Buchanan, she said. I saw it come up, Gloria said. What are you thinking? I'm thinking $1.4 million with a repair credit for the electrical. 30-day close. Through Ellison? A pause. Through Ellison, Denise said. He's the listing agent. That's how this works. Gloria was quiet for a moment. Then, you good with that? I'm a professional, Denise said simply. This is business. She submitted the offer on Thursday. Craig presented it to Gerald on Friday morning. Gerald accepted by noon. The closing was scheduled for the last Friday of February. Same title company on Dedrick Street, same Patricia, with the 22 years of experience and the calm efficiency and the 2 neat stacks of documents. Gerald Park signed first. Then Denise. Craig was there as the listing agent, required by the transaction. He sat at the far end of the table with his folder and his blue tie and the expression of a man who is working very hard to appear at ease. When the last signature was done and Patricia was assembling the final copies, Gerald Park shook Denise's hand warmly. Treat her well, he said, meaning the building, the way people talk about buildings they've cared for. I will, she said, and meant it. Craig stood, extended his hand. She shook it. Professional, brief, complete. Congratulations, Ms. Carter, he said. Thank you, she said, and that was it. No confrontation, no speech, no moment where she looked him in the eye and said, Do you remember? April. Do you remember the conference room? Do you remember telling me to look at properties in Bordeaux? She didn't say any of it because she didn't need to. He knew, she knew, he knew, and the building was hers. That was the whole point. 3 weeks after the closing, Craig Ellison's lease on his office suite at the Charlotte Avenue building came up for renewal. His firm had been in that building for 4 years. Ground floor, good visibility, parking. He received a letter from the new property management company, a firm Denise had contracted to handle her growing portfolio, informing him that the building had been acquired by a new owner and that all existing commercial tenants would receive updated lease agreements reflecting current market rates. He almost didn't read the ownership information at the bottom of the letter. Almost. The building had been purchased, the letter stated, by Buchanan Street Properties, LLC. He looked it up. Buchanan Street Properties, LLC. Registered agent, Gloria Reeves, CPA. Managing member, Denise A. Carter. He sat with that for a long time. Then he signed the new lease. Market rate, 5-year term. He signed it because the location was good and the parking was right, and because sometimes the choices you make in a conference room on a Tuesday morning in April follow you in ways you cannot anticipate. He signed it, and every month his check went to Denise Carter. Brianna got into Howard University, full academic scholarship, architecture program, starting in the fall. Denise found out on a Tuesday evening in March. The email came at 6:47 p.m., and Brianna screamed from upstairs. Not the alarmed kind, the other kind, the kind that only comes from the specific relief of a door you weren't sure would open, finally swinging wide. Denise stood at the bottom of the stairs and listened to her daughter scream and laugh and call her best friend and scream again. She didn't move for a while. She just stood there. Her mother had worked 31 years of night shifts so that Denise could go to Tennessee State without owing anyone anything. Denise had spent 24 years learning a market, absorbing its silence, enduring its smallness, building her knowledge into something no one could dismiss or redirect toward Bordeaux. And now, Brianna was going to Howard to study how buildings are made. There is a line that runs through some families, not always visible, not always straight, but always there. The line of one generation, carrying what the previous one couldn't finish. Your grandmother sweeps the porch every morning because dignity doesn't wait for an audience. Your mother works the night shift because the lights need to stay on. You learn the market because knowledge is the one asset they cannot repossess. Your daughter studies architecture because she is going to design the buildings you learn to own. That line doesn't break. It bends. It stretches. It goes underground for years sometimes, where you can't see it and you start to wonder if it was ever real. But it doesn't break. I want to tell you something about Denise that the story almost didn't show you. There was a night, somewhere between the closing on Buchanan Street and the first renovation payment to James Whitfield, when she sat at her kitchen table at 2 a.m. with a legal pad and a calculator and the particular fear that comes not from failure, but from the size of what you've chosen to attempt. She had just spent $96 million. She had $34,000 in HVAC repairs ahead of her and $500 in roof work and 2 vacant commercial spaces and 8 residential tenants who were counting on her in the specific way that tenants count on landlords, not with warmth, not with trust earned yet, but with the basic human expectation that the heat will work and the doors will lock and someone will answer when something goes wrong. She sat with all of that at 2 a.m., and she didn't call anyone. She just sat with it, because some weight you have to feel completely before you can carry it properly. She thought about her mother, about the night shifts, about the specific texture of tiredness that comes from doing hard work in the dark when no one is watching, and the only thing keeping you going is the knowledge that it matters. Not that anyone will see it, not that anyone will thank you, just that it matters. She thought about Craig Ellison, not with anger, not anymore, with something closer to clarity. He had looked at her and seen a category, and the category had told him she didn't belong in those rooms. Not the conference room, not the market, not the corridor, not the closing table. And here is what she understood, sitting at that table at 2 a.m. He had been wrong, not because she had proven him wrong. He had been wrong before she walked into his office, before the pre-approval letter, before the leather portfolio, before the charcoal blazer and the gold earrings. He had been wrong the moment he decided he could know what she was worth from looking at her. That's not about her qualifications. That's about his limitation. And his limitation had become, over the course of 10 months, her opportunity. Not because she had planned it that way. Because she had refused to let his ceiling become her floor. By the spring of 2024, Buchanan Street Properties, LLC, held 3 commercial assets in the North Nashville corridor, with a combined assessed value of $5.1 million. Diane Okafor's natural hair studio had hired 2 additional stylists. Marcus Webb's bookstore had partnered with 2 local schools to run an after-school reading program on Saturday mornings. Earl's Sandwich Shop, the one that had been there since 1987, had a new back entrance properly repaired on Denise's dime. He had not asked for it. She had just done it. The residential tenants on Buchanan Street had received a letter in January informing them that rents would remain stable through the end of the year. 7 of the 8 had sent something back, not formal responses, just notes, handwritten mostly, the kind people write when they want to say something but don't have the ceremony for it. One of them, a woman in her 60s named Roberta, who had lived in Unit 4 for 11 years, wrote 4 sentences. Denise kept the note in her desk drawer. She didn't frame it. She didn't post it. She just kept it, because some things are not for the world. Some things are just yours. Craig Ellison paid his rent on the 1st of every month. Direct deposit. Denise received the notification on her phone the same way she received all of them. A small alert, a number, a confirmation that the portfolio was working. She did not celebrate it. She did not think about him when it came through. She just noted it, the way you note any steady, reliable thing, the way the heat comes on in the morning, the way the coffee finishes brewing, the way the building stands on the corner of Buchanan Street exactly as it stood before she bought it and will stand long after both she and Craig Ellison have moved on to whatever comes next. She had not bought that building to make a point. She had bought it because it was the right building. Craig Ellison had just gotten in the way, and then, later, gotten out of it. Here is the thing I want to leave you with. Not a lesson, not a moral, just a thing. Denise Carter did not win because she was exceptional. She won because she was prepared, because she had spent 24 years learning something real, because she had a Gloria who understood when a call was business and when it was something more, because she had a James Whitfield who didn't pad his estimates, because she had a mother who swept the porch every morning so that her daughter would understand, without being told, that you maintain what is yours with consistency and without applause. She won because she had been building quietly, specifically, without announcing herself, long before Craig Ellison ever gave her a reason to. His dismissal didn't create her. It just removed an obstacle she hadn't needed anyway. And that is the part that stays with me. The idea that the most powerful thing you can do when someone looks at you and sees a category, when someone redirects you toward the smaller room, when someone folds your $2.3 million pre-approval letter back across the table like it means nothing, the most powerful thing you can do is already be building something they will eventually have to rent from you. Not out of revenge, out of vision. Denise's mother never saw the buildings. She passed in the fall of 2021, 2 years before the Buchanan Street closing, a Tuesday morning. Méthodiste Le Bonheur Hospital, the same hospital where she had worked 31 years of night shifts. There is something about that. Denise doesn't talk about it much, but I think about it. The woman who kept the lights on so her daughter could go to college without owing anyone anything. She didn't get to see the buildings. She didn't get to see Brianna's Howard acceptance letter. She didn't get to see the note from Roberta in Unit 4, but she swept the porch every morning. And her daughter remembered, and her granddaughter is going to Howard to study how buildings are made. The line doesn't break. If this story reached something in you, if you heard yourself somewhere in these 60 minutes, share it with 5 people who need to hear it today. Not because the algorithm needs it, because somebody in your life is sitting in a parking lot right now, hands on a wheel, engine off, trying to decide what to do next. Send it to her. Subscribe to this channel. Come back tomorrow. We tell these stories every day because they are real and they matter, and someone needs to tell them right. Leave us a comment, not just a reaction, a real one. Tell us what part of Denise's story hit you the hardest. Tell us what you're building that nobody knows about yet. And tell us, what story do you want us to tell next? We're listening. We're always listening.